A 7-year-old girl heard something she was never supposed to hear. A Korean mafia boss was about to walk into a trap, and the woman standing between them had no idea her quiet life was about to explode into something she could never take back. New to this channel? You're going to want to stay for every single batch of this story. Tap subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Don't get on that plane. The little girl said it the way children say things. No fear, no decoration, just the flat truth of it landing right in the middle of all that airport noise. Beck Isel stopped walking. He was not the kind of man who stopped for anything. Not for traffic, not for bodyguards waving warning signs, not for the 3 separate intelligence agencies that had been trying to catch him for 11 years. He was 41 years old, born in a small city in North Chungcheong province where nobody had heard of him then and everybody had heard of him now, and he had learned very early in life that hesitation was the same thing as weakness. But the child had said it with such certainty. She was standing right at the edge of Gate 7B, holding the strap of a little purple backpack with both hands, and she was looking directly at him. Not at the men behind him. Not at the gate. At him, like she had picked him out of a crowd of 400 people and decided that he, specifically, was the one who needed to know. He crouched down to her level, which surprised his head of security, a wide man named Do Sangmin, who had been with Isel for 9 years and had maybe seen him crouch twice. "What did you say?" Isel asked. The girl did not flinch. She had the kind of eyes that belonged to someone much older, not sad eyes, just watching eyes. Eyes that had already decided something. "Those 2 men," she said, tipping her head toward the jet bridge doors without pointing, the way smart children do when they know they are not supposed to be obvious. The ones in the orange vests pretending to be airport workers. They were talking in Italian, not to each other about work stuff. One of them said sul volo, and then he said a number that sounded like a seat number. Then the other one said, aspetta il segnale. Wait for the signal. Isel looked at the 2 men. Orange vests. Clipboards. One of them had his hand in his vest pocket in the exact way someone keeps their hand near something they do not want anyone to see. How do you know Italian? Isel asked. My grandma watches Italian cooking shows, the girl said. Every single day. I know a lot of Italian food words, and also I can hear accents. My mum says I have ears like a rabbit. Isel almost smiled. Almost. Where's your mum? He asked. And that was the moment everything changed, because the girl turned around and pointed toward the small food kiosk 20 feet away, and the woman standing there with her back to them, paying for 2 bottles of water and a packet of crackers, turned around at the exact same time. She was tall. She was wearing a yellow wrap dress that had a small stain near the pocket from what looked like orange juice, and she had natural hair pulled up into a puff that was slightly lopsided because, Isel would learn later, the girl had been sitting on her lap for 2 hours on the earlier flight and had grabbed the left side. She had the face of someone who had been awake since 4 in the morning and was still choosing to be kind about it. And she was looking at her daughter with a specific expression that mothers use when they spot their child talking to a stranger. Not panic, but a very fast, very quiet emergency calculation. She walked over quickly. Diana. Her voice was low and warm and firm all at once. What did I say about? She stopped. She looked at Isel, really looked at him, not the way people look at someone dangerous, but the way someone looks at a problem they have not fully understood yet. I am so sorry. She is very friendly, and also very. She may have just saved my life, Isel said. The woman blinked. Her name was Sandra Ferreira. She was 34 years old, originally from a coastal city in Côte d'Ivoire, raised partly in Portugal, which was why her last name was Portuguese, and currently living in Osaka, where she worked as a medical interpreter and translator. She spoke 6 languages, which is how she knew immediately that the way this man said saved my life was not dramatic. He said it the same way someone reads a departure time off a screen. Factual. Measured. Diana, she said carefully, not looking away from Isel. Come stand with me. Diana came and slipped her hand into her mother's without being asked. My name is Beck Isel, he said, standing back up to his full height. He was taller than most people expected, not just physically, but in the way he occupied space, like the air around him had agreed to make room. I would very much like to buy you both something to eat and speak with you for 10 minutes. Not here. We have a flight, Sandra said. Which flight? She hesitated, and then she realized that was probably not smart information to give a stranger, even a polite one. So she said, "One that leaves soon." "Mine too," he said. "Mine is apparently no longer safe. Yours may be the same flight." He looked at his head of security, who was already on his earpiece. Sang-min. Songmin's expression was the kind that people get when a small child has accidentally cracked open a case that 3 professionals missed. He looked almost offended. He looked very quietly horrified. Gate 7B and 7C share a jet bridge access corridor, Sang-min said, low and tight. If they were targeting your seat assignment, they would have needed to be positioned before boarding. They have been there for 40 minutes. The flight is not just yours, sir. Sandra heard that. Diana, who had been looking at a display of stuffed animals near the kiosk, looked back at her mum. Children always know when adults have just received bad news, even when the adults have not said anything yet. Diana knew. Her little face went very still. "Okay," Sandra said quietly. 10 minutes. The airport lounge that Isol's team cleared in under 4 minutes was the kind of place that existed behind an unmarked door between a charging station and a storage closet, one of those spaces in large international airports that most people walk past their whole lives and never notice. Inside there were 6 chairs, a small table, a coffee machine, and a window that looked out over the tarmac. Diana immediately went to the window because she had decided the planes were more interesting than the adults. Sandra sat. She sat with her bag on her lap and her hands folded over it. Not scared, Isol noticed, but extremely alert. The way someone sits when they have learned that being alert is smarter than being scared. "You're not going to tell me who you are," she said. It was not a question. "I told you my name." "Your name is not who you are." He looked at her for a moment. "No," he said. "It is not." "The men in the vests," she said. "Are they gone?" Sang-min, from near the door, said, "Airport security is moving toward their position now. We have eyes on them." "How does a 7-year-old girl pick out an assassination attempt that your whole team missed?" Sandra asked. She said it without any edge, genuinely curious, the way a scientist asks a question. Isol turned to look at Diana, who was pressing her nose against the window glass. "Diana," Sandra called, "don't fog up the glass." Diana pulled back half an inch. "She was not looking for it," Isol said. "She was just listening. Children listen differently." He paused. "My team was watching for threats that look like threats." She heard a language that did not fit and she paid attention. "She does that," Sandra said. There was something in her voice, pride, yes, but also something older. Something that sounded like a person who has carried a heavy thing for so long they have forgotten it is heavy. "She has always done that." "Her father?" Isol asked, and he asked it the way someone touches a bruise, not to hurt but to know. Sandra looked at him flatly. "Not part of our story." He accepted that. "Where are you going?" "Visiting family. My cousin is getting married." She tilted her head. "You? Business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that apparently needs Italian contractors at airports," he said, which was as close to the truth as he was going to go in this room with her daughter, right there. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are we in danger?" "Right now." "Not later." "Right now." "I do not believe so." This was targeted. Specific. He nodded toward the tarmac. "But I would prefer if you and your daughter took a different flight." "We have tickets." "I can have different tickets arranged in 11 minutes. She looked at him. "You can have different tickets arranged in 11 minutes. "Yes." "To the same destination?" "To wherever you're going." She stared at him for a long moment and then she said, very quietly so Diana would not hear, "Who are you really?" Isol leaned forward slightly. "Someone who owes your daughter a very large debt." That was when Diana turned away from the window and said, with complete confidence, "Mum, that man is important, but I think he's sad." The room went absolutely silent. Sandra closed her eyes for just a second, the specific expression of a mother whose child has said the true thing in the room full of adults pretending not to know the true thing. Isol looked at Diana. Diana looked back at him with those watching eyes. "You're right," he said, "on both counts." The next 40 minutes were some of the strangest of Sandra Ferreira's 34 years, which already contained a fair number of strange minutes. ISIL's team confirmed that the two men in orange vests had been detained, carrying microtransmitters and a substance that airport security was currently being very quiet about. The original flight was grounded pending investigation. Every single passenger was rerouted. New tickets appeared for Sandra and Diana. Business class. Same destination, a coastal city in southern France where Sandra's cousin Precious was getting married in 4 days. Sandra looked at the tickets on her phone, then at ISIL, then at the tickets again. "This is not something I can pay you back for," she said. "You already did," he said. Diana did. Then she did. He stood. His team was already moving. He was clearly a man who moved from one room to the next without ceremony, no lingering, no soft exits. Just a decision and then motion. But at the door he stopped. He turned back.
"The wedding," he said.
"Where exactly is it being held?" Sandra blinked. "Why?" "I ask too many questions," he said. "It is a habit."
"It is," she agreed.
Something crossed his face. So fast she almost missed it. And it might have been, if she was reading it correctly, something that resembled the earliest, most cautious version of amusement. Then he was gone. Diana watched the door close. Then she looked up at her mum. "He's going to see us again," she said. "Diana. I'm just saying." Sandra picked up the purple backpack. She handed Diana the crackers. She looked at the closed door for just a moment longer than necessary. "Finish your snack," she said. 3 days later, 200 miles south, a man who had not attended a wedding in 11 years found himself standing outside the gates of a chateau where white flowers were strung between every olive tree in sight, and he was wearing the exact wrong kind of jacket for it. And inside, someone was already wondering why the name on the guest list she had never seen before matched the face from the airport she had not been able to stop thinking about. Something was already beginning. Neither of them had agreed to it. That almost never matters. The chateau sat at the edge of a hill where the land tipped gently toward the sea, and if you stood at the right corner of the garden, you could see the water glittering out between two old cypress trees like something the world had decided to leave there just to remind you it was still beautiful. Sandra was not standing at that corner. She was standing near the dessert table, holding a glass of water, listening to her Auntie Blessing explain, for the 3rd time, that Sandra really needed to think about what kind of example she was setting for Diana by still being unmarried at 34. "Auntie," Sandra said patiently, "Diana is thriving. Thriving is not the same as having a father figure." "Mum," Diana said, appearing from nowhere with powdered sugar on her nose. "There is a man at the gate, and the flower lady is arguing with him, because he doesn't have a badge." Sandra turned. At the iron gate of the chateau's garden entrance, a man in a dark jacket was speaking in clipped, careful French to a very determined woman in a floral apron who was holding a clipboard like a shield. The man was not getting loud. He was not getting frustrated. He was just being very, very patient, the way a person is patient when they know patience is eventually going to win. It was Beck ISIL. Sandra excused herself from Auntie Blessing, who immediately pivoted to tell the story to the nearest cousin instead. She walked to the gate. ISIL saw her coming before she said anything. He turned from the flower lady with something that was almost relief, not the dramatic kind, just the quiet easing of a situation that had been slightly inconvenient. "You did not tell me this was a private chateau with badge requirements," he said. "You did not tell me you were coming," she said. "I had business nearby. In the south of France." It moved. She looked at him for a moment. The flower lady looked between them with great interest. "Let him in, please," Sandra said to the flower lady.
"He is," she paused.
"He is a guest." The flower lady, who had clearly been hoping for more drama than this, made a note on her clipboard and stepped aside. ISIL came through the gate. He was wearing the wrong jacket. It was dark and perfectly fitted, but it was a city jacket, not a garden wedding jacket, and it made him look like someone who had made a decision very recently and not had time to reconsider the dress code. His 2 security men, a different pair than the airport, positioned themselves near the outer wall with the professional subtlety of people who were very bad at being subtle. "Your men are obvious," Sandra said, walking back toward the garden. "They know," he said, keeping pace beside her. "They accept it as a personal failing." Diana appeared in front of them on the path, having eaten whatever had sugar on her nose, and now holding a small sprig of lavender someone had given her. She looked at Isol without surprise, the way a child looks at something they already predicted.
Hi, she said.
Hello, Diana, he said. I knew you'd come, she said, and then she ran off to find her second cousin Didi, who had promised to show her the old stone well at the back of the garden. Isol watched her go. There was something in his expression, not softness exactly, more like the way a very guarded person looks when something has gotten past their guard before they noticed. She said that at the airport too, Sandra said. That you would see us again. Smart child. Very. Sandra stopped walking. They were near the old olive trees now, away from most of the guests, and the music from the main terrace was just far enough away to be background instead of obstacle. What do you actually want, Mr. Beck? Isol, he said. Isol. She said it carefully, 3 syllables in her mouth, the accent landing slightly differently than Korean, but not wrong. What do you want? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive quiet, thinking quiet, the kind where the answer is already known and the person is just deciding how much of it to say. I wanted to make sure you were safe, he said. We are. I can see that. Then, and I wanted, he stopped. He looked at the olive trees. I wanted to see where the story went. That surprised her. She had expected something strategic. Something with more corners to it. Not that. We are not a story, she said.
No, he agreed.
Not yet. She should have walked away then. She knew that. He was a man who had people trying to kill him at airports and a head of security who communicated in code and a jacket that was wrong for the occasion but perfect for him, and he had walked into a family wedding in the south of France because his business had moved and she knew what that meant, or at least she knew it meant something she should not be comfortable with. She did not walk away. My cousin's wedding is tomorrow, she said. There will be food and music and my Auntie Blessing will talk to every single person here for at least 15 minutes each. There is no dress code, but your jacket will get you some questions. I can handle questions. I believe you.
She paused.
There is a table near the garden wall that has extra seats because 3 people canceled at the last minute. If you wanted somewhere to sit that is not in the middle of everything. He nodded once. Precise. Like a decision, not an acceptance.
Thank you, he said.
Do not thank me. If my Annie finds out you're Korean, she will tell you every Korean drama she has ever watched and she has watched. Sandra searched for the right word. Many. Something moved in his face. Definite amusement this time, not just almost. I will survive, he said. The wedding of Precious Ferreira and Alain Dubois was exactly what a wedding in the south of France in late summer should be. Too much food. Music that went from traditional to chaotic and back again, a flower girl who lost a shoe, and at least 4 separate speeches that went on longer than anyone had planned. Diana sat next to Isol at the garden wall table for most of the evening, which had not been planned by anyone but had clearly been decided by Diana, who had opinions about where she wanted to sit. She asked him questions the way children ask questions, without embarrassment, without softening, just straight through. Do you have kids?
No.
Do you want some? Diana. Sandra started from across the table. It is fine, Isol said.
He looked at Diana.
I have not thought about it. You should think about it, Diana said seriously. Kids are good at noticing things. Useful. I have learned that recently, he said. Are you dangerous? She asked. The table went slightly quiet. Sandra's cousin Didi and her husband had been half following the conversation and now were not pretending not to follow it. Isol looked at Diana for a moment. I try not to be, he said, to people who do not deserve it. Diana considered this with great seriousness, the way she considered everything. Then she nodded and went back to eating her cake, apparently satisfied. Sandra looked at Isol across the table. He looked back. Neither of them said anything, but there was a whole separate conversation happening in the silence, the kind that happens between 2 people who are both too careful to say the real thing but are running out of space to avoid it. Didi, who had the instincts of someone who had grown up watching Sandra be careful about everything, smiled into her glass. It was after 10 when the music shifted to something slower and the older guests had moved to the terrace and the children had been collected by their tired parents. Diana had fallen asleep in a chair near the garden wall, covered by the light jacket Sandra had draped over her, one hand still curled around the lavender sprig. Sandra was sitting on the low stone wall at the edge of the garden, looking out at the water between the cypress trees. Isol came and stood near her. Not right next to her, but nearby, which she had noticed was his way. He never crowded. He always left space. "Your security men went home?" she asked. "Rotation," he said. "Two others are at the perimeter." Perimeter of the wedding. Yes. That is, she thought of the right word. Intense. "My life is intense," he said. It was not a complaint, just a fact, the way rain is a fact. She looked out at the water. "The men at the airport," she said. Was that personal? Or was it business?"
"Both," he said.
"There are people who want me out of a particular arrangement. Permanently." "How many people?" "Enough." She was quiet. "You know what I am," he said. Not a question. "I know what you might be," she said carefully. "I have not decided what I know." "That is wise," he said. "It is self-preservation," she corrected.
He accepted that.
"And you are still sitting here," he said. She turned to look at him then, finally, directly. In the low garden light he looked, not softer, because he was not a soft person and she did not think he had ever been one, but quieter. Like the version of him that existed before whatever had made him what he was. Like a room where someone had turned the volume down. "Diana said you were sad," she said. Diana is observant. Is she wrong? He looked at the water for a long moment. "No," he said. "She is not wrong." "How long?" He thought about it. 11 years. 11 years was a very specific number. She almost asked what had happened 11 years ago, and then she decided that was a door for another time if there was another time, because some doors you do not walk through the first night, and some weights you do not ask someone to lift in front of you yet. "I have been carrying something for 7 years, she said instead, nodding toward the sleeping Diana. "Not the same. But heavy." He looked at her. "Her father left before she was born. Very cleanly. Very completely." She paused. It stopped being about him after about a year. It just became about, she searched for the shape of it. About making sure she never feels like she is missing anything, which is its own kind of weight. "She does not seem to feel like she is missing anything," he said. "No," Sandra said. "She really doesn't." She said it with the quiet wonder of someone who had worked very hard for a result and still finds the result surprising. The music from the terrace drifted down to them, something slow and half-forgotten. "I should take her to bed soon," Sandra said. "Yes," he said. Neither of them moved for another few minutes. Diana woke up just enough to walk, which she did with her eyes half closed and one hand to her mum's, and Sandra guided her up the path toward the chateau's guest rooms. At the inner door, she turned. Isol was still standing at the edge of the garden, looking at the water between the trees.
She almost said something.
She decided against it. She went inside. She spent 20 minutes getting Diana into bed and then lay on her own bed in the dark, looking at the ceiling, thinking about a man who had walked into the wrong wedding in the wrong jacket because his business had moved, and thinking about the fact that she was not as unsettled by any of it as she should probably be. Her phone lit up. A message from a number she did not have saved. "Safe travels tomorrow. Thank you for the seat at the wall table." She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed, "How did you get this number?" His reply came in under 30 seconds. "You gave it to Sangmin at the airport for the ticket rerouting." She had. She had forgotten. She put her phone down, picked it up again. She typed, "Diana says you are going to see us again." His reply, "Diana is rarely wrong." She put the phone down for real this time. But she was smiling at the ceiling, which was inconvenient, and also, she was fairly sure, completely inevitable. Except, 4 time zones away, in a clean office above a shipping port, a woman named Yilin Park was looking at a photograph. In the photograph, a man in a dark jacket at a garden wedding, sitting at a table with a small girl and a woman in a yellow dress. The woman's name was Yilin Park, and she was the one who had sent the men in orange vests to the airport. She had missed. She did not plan to miss again. And now she had something she had not had before. Names. Sandra had a rule about her mornings. She did not look at her phone before she had coffee, before Diana was fed, and before she had stood at a window for at least 3 minutes and just looked at something that was not a screen. She broke all 3 rules the morning after the wedding. The first message was from Isol. It had been sent at 5:40 in the morning. "There is a situation. not involving you directly. But I need you to know that someone may have photographs of you from last night. I am handling it.
Do not change your plans.
Travel as scheduled. She read it 3 times. She read it the way you read something when your brain understands the words, but is waiting for the meaning to arrive in a more manageable shape. Then she went and got coffee, because she was not going to deal with this without coffee. Diana came patting in while Sandra was still staring at the mug, fully awake and already dressed because Diana had opinions about mornings. What's wrong?
Diana said.
Nothing is wrong. Your face is doing the thing. I do not have a thing. Diana sat across from her and ate a piece of bread from the basket on the table and looked at her mum with the patient expression of someone waiting for the truth to arrive. Sandra put the phone screen down on the table. Someone may have taken pictures of us last night. Diana chewed her bread. The man with the sharp eyes. Sandra looked up. What? There was a man near the outer garden path, Diana said, very casually, like she was describing the weather. He had a camera under his jacket, not a regular camera, a flat one. He was there when we were sitting at the wall table, and then he was gone after you put me to bed.
Diana.
Why did you not? I thought he was one of Isol's security men, she said. He was dressed the same. Sandra pulled her phone back. She called Isol. He picked up on the second ring, which told her he had been expecting it. She saw him, Sandra said without a preamble. A pause.
Yes.
We identified him 4 hours ago. He was not one of ours. Then whose? That is what I am working on. His voice was calm, not the calm of someone who was fine, but the calm of someone who had trained themselves to stay functional under conditions that were not fine. I meant what I said. Do not change your schedule. Moving you unexpectedly is more dangerous than moving you predictably at this point. How is that possible? Unexpected movement tells them they've been noticed. Predictable movement gives my people time to set up properly around your route. She had 6 languages and a very good brain, and she understood exactly what he had just said, which was, you are being moved like a piece on a board, and I am the one moving you. I did not agree to be moved, she said. Silence. No, he said. You did not. And I am asking you, not instructing you, to trust me for another 48 hours. She looked at Diana, who was watching her with bread in one hand.
My daughter, she said.
If anything. Nothing will happen to her, he said. I will take that as my personal responsibility. You barely know us. I know that she saved my life 3 days ago. I know enough. The drive to the airport was quiet. Isol's people, a different configuration now, for instead of 2, wearing clothes that actually fit the context this time, were somewhere on the route but invisible, which Sandra found both reassuring and alarming in equal parts. Diana spent the journey with her face at the window, watching the Provençal landscape go by, the pale stone walls, the rows of lavender, the sky that in this part of the world in late summer was a particular shade of blue that looked like something a person invented rather than something that actually existed. Mom, she said, about 20 minutes in. Do you like him? Sandra kept her eyes on the road. That is a complicated question. Not really, Diana said. You talk differently when you're near him.
How?
Slower. Like you're thinking about the words more. Sandra had no response to that. He looks at you differently too, Diana said. Like, you know how people look at something they're worried about breaking? I am not something that can be broken, Sandra said. I know that, Diana said, unimpressed. I don't think he does yet. She went back to looking out the window, satisfied, and Sandra drove and did not say anything and thought about it the entire rest of the way to the airport. The airport was smaller than an international one, a regional hub, pale stone and glass, and the smell of pastry from a cafe near the entrance. Sandra was checking in at the counter when someone appeared at her elbow. Not Isol. Not one of his people. A woman. She was elegant in the specific way that comes from money and also from practice. Maybe early 40s, dark hair, a coat that was the kind of gray that costs a lot to achieve, and she smiled at Sandra with the precise warmth of someone who had rehearsed warmth. Miss Ferreira, she said. Sandra did not confirm it. I think you have been meeting with someone who has put you in a very uncomfortable position, the woman said, keeping her voice low and pleasant. I only want to tell you, woman to woman, that you should take your daughter and go home. Not to France. Not to Osaka. Home. Somewhere he does not know about. Because the people he has made angry do not care about bystanders. Sandra looked at her. Who are you? She said.
A warning, the woman said.
That is not an answer. No, she agreed. It is not. She glanced down at Diana, who was looking up at her with those watching eyes. Something moved through the woman's face, not softness, more like recognition. A quick, uncomfortable recognition. She looks like a sharp one.
She is, Sandra said.
Then you know she deserves better than getting caught in the crossfire of something she has nothing to do with. She stepped back. Think carefully about what you want your next move to be, Miss Ferreira. The wrong one is expensive. She walked away, moving through the airport crowd without looking back. Diana watched her go. She lied, Diana said. Sandra pulled her close, instinctive. What? Her voice went higher at the end. The part about bystanders. My teacher at school does that when she says something she's not totally sure about. Diana looked up. She was scared too. Sandra called Isol. He picked up in one ring this time. Someone just spoke to me at the airport, she said. A woman. Elegant. Gray coat. She told me to go somewhere you don't know about. The quality of his silence changed. Describe her.
She did.
Another silence. Then, very quietly, he said a single name. Not to her. To someone in the room with him.
Isol, she said.
What is happening? Yulin Park, he said. She is, he stopped. She is someone I trusted for a very long time. Trusted. Past tense. Yes. Is she the one who sent the men at the airport? He did not answer right away, which was its own answer. Are we safe right now?
Sandra asked.
My people are 20 meters from you on your left and behind the coffee kiosk on your right, he said. You're safe. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am listening. Do not take your scheduled flight. You just told me. Things changed in the last 4 minutes. I am sending someone to you now. Please stay near the coffee kiosk. Do not move until my person reaches you. She looked at the kiosk. A man behind the counter met her eyes briefly, nodded once. One of Isol's, she realized, had been there the whole time. She took Diana's hand. Okay, she said. What happened next was something Sandra would replay in her head for a very long time. Isol arrived himself. Not his person, him. In a car that pulled up to the regional airport drop-off zone 22 minutes after her call, which meant he had been closer than he had told her. Which meant he had been following their route. Which meant she decided to save that conversation for when they were not in an active situation. He came through the entrance quickly, not running, because running draws attention, but moving with a directional urgency that parted the crowd without him having to say anything to anyone. Sang-min was behind him. 2 others flanked wide.
He found her by the kiosk.
For a moment, he just checked her. Eyes moving from her face to Diana and back. A quick assessment. The kind you do when you are frightened and trying not to show it. You're all right, he said.
It was not a question this time.
It was a decision. I am annoyed, she said. But yes. Something in him eased, very slightly. Diana looked between them and then tugged Sandra's sleeve. Mum, she said. He was scared. Diana. It's okay to be scared, Diana told Isol directly. It means you care about something. Isol looked down at her. When did you become this wise, he said. I have always been this wise, Diana said. Adults just don't listen. The plan changed. The flight changed. Everything changed. In a private room at the back of the airport, not the lounge this time, an actual office that Isol's team had cleared, Sandra sat across from him and finally asked the question she had been walking around for 3 days. Yulin Park, she said.
Who was she to you?
He was quiet for a long moment. She ran the financial side of my organization for 6 years, he said. I trusted her with everything. Accounts, routes, contacts, everything. He looked at the table. 8 months ago, I found evidence that she had been passing information to a rival group. Not just information. She had been building a case to have me removed permanently so that she could take over the arrangement herself. She betrayed you, Sandra said. Yes. And instead of going to the authorities. My world does not work with authorities, he said, and he said it without apology, which she respected more than if he had tried to soften it. So, she sent people to the airport, Sandra said. And when that did not work, She came to me to warn me away. Because with you gone, he said, there is no witness. No one who can describe her approach or her warning or her presence. I am a loose end, Sandra said. You were, he said. You are not now. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means I am going to make sure you and Diana are somewhere safe until this is resolved. Completely resolved. He met her eyes. And I'm going to resolve it.
How?
That is the part that is not your concern. It became my concern when your enemy put her hand on my shoulder in an airport, Sandra said, very calmly.
He could not argue with that.
I have people who handle this without violence, he said, carefully. Yillin's own documentation, the records she built to build her case, can be turned against her. She built a paper trail to take me down, and she did not realize I had already found it.
He paused.
Legal exposure. Financial ruin. That is the resolution. Without anyone getting hurt. Without anyone getting hurt. She held his gaze for a moment, measuring, the way she did with everything important. I need you to tell me one thing, she said. What? Are you the kind of person who, when this is over, walks away? Because that is, I can respect that. I can work with that. But I need to know which story this is. He looked at her for a long time. I do not know yet, he said. I have not allowed myself to think about what comes after for a very long time. That is honest, she said. You said you needed one thing. I gave you the honest version.
You did, she said.
She looked over at Diana, who had found a notepad and a pen somewhere and was drawing something with intense concentration, completely in her own world. 48 hours, Sandra said finally. You have 48 hours to resolve this. And then I am going home to Osaka with my daughter, and we are going back to our normal life. And after that, he said. She looked at him. Ask me again in 48 hours, she said. Except 48 hours did not go the way either of them planned. Because Yilin Park had not come to that airport just to warn Sandra. She had come to make sure Sandra could be found again. And she already had someone waiting at the other end. The safe house was in a small village in the foothills, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and a stranger stood out like a word in the wrong language. Isol's team had used it before, which was both reassuring and slightly worrying when Sandra thought about what used before might mean in this context. The house itself was old stone and blue shutters, with a garden that someone had once cared for very much, and that was now in the specific kind of overgrown that looks intentional from a distance. There were 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with good light, and a table in the garden where Diana immediately installed herself with her notepad. Sangmin had arranged food. Real food, not airport food, not catered wedding food, actual cooked food, and Sandra had cooked with Diana for an hour because movement was better than stillness and familiar things were better than unfamiliar ones, and she needed her daughter to feel like this was an adventure and not a problem. Diana seemed to feel it was both, which was accurate. Isol worked from the front room. He had a laptop and a phone and a second phone, and he was on one or the other for most of the first 12 hours, speaking in Korean and occasionally in English, and once in what sounded like Mandarin, and Sandra stayed mostly on the other side of the house because she had decided not to need to understand everything. But at some point in the late afternoon she brought him tea, because she was not the kind of person who let someone work for 12 hours without tea, whatever else she thought about them. He looked up. She put the mug on the table next to the laptop. How is it going? She said. Slowly, he said. And then it will go quickly. That is how it always is. Diana made the tea, she said. I supervised. She is very serious about it. He looked at the mug. Then he picked it up and drank and said, It is good. I will tell her. Sandra turned to go back. Sandra. She stopped.
Sit, he said.
For a few minutes. I need to, he stopped. Started again. I need to think out loud. And you are, a pause. You think clearly. Clearly enough to push back when I am wrong. She sat. What is the problem? She said. Yilin has a contact, he said. Inside my organization. Someone who is still giving her information. She knew the flight. She knew the seat number, the specific seat, not just the flight, which means she knew what I booked after she was already gone. Only 5 people knew that. I have narrowed it to 2. He turned the laptop so she could see it, not names, just a diagram, boxes connected by lines, the shape of a network. Both are people I have known for years. One of them has been with me since before I built any of this. The other came in later, but has performed without failure for 4 years. Can you narrow it further? She said. The information about the seat number was shared 12 hours before the flight. Only one of the two was in a position to pass it in that window.
Then it is that one, she said.
That is what the logic says, he said. But logic has been used against me before. Yilin is smart enough to make one person look guilty to protect another. So you're stuck between trusting the logic and trusting your instinct, she said. Yes. Which one are you leaning toward? He was quiet. My instinct says the older one, he said. The one who has been with me since the beginning. Because he stopped. Because it would hurt more, she said. He looked at her. That is not evidence, he said.
No, she said.
But it is almost always true. The ones who can hurt you most are the ones who have been there longest. That is not instinct, that is just the structure of trust. She looked at the diagram. What does the older one have to gain? What would make someone who has been loyal for that long change? He thought about it. Money, he said. Or a threat they did not come to me with. Yilin is capable of both. If it was a threat, Sandra said, they may not have had a choice. Which changes things. He looked at her like she had said something unexpected. In my world, he said slowly, there is always no choice until there is a choice, she said. I am not telling you to forgive it. I am saying there is a difference between someone who sold you and someone who is terrified into it. One of those is a decision you make going forward. The other is a conversation.
He was quiet for a long time.
You are not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? I do not know.
A pause.
Someone more frightened. I have been frightened since the airport, she said. I am just not interested in performing it.
She stood.
Find the right answer. Not just the logical one. She went back to the kitchen. He sat for a long time after that, looking at the diagram, and then he made a call, not to Sangmin, not to any of the people in the boxes, but to the older one. The one his instinct had named. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. He did not tell Sandra what was said. But something in the way he moved afterward was different. Quieter, maybe, or heavier, or both. The night came fast the way it does in summer in the south, full dark by 9, and the village went quiet and the garden at the safe house was lit only by what came through the kitchen window. Diana had fallen asleep on the small sofa in the front room with a blanket Sangmin had found, which had made Sangmin look briefly like he had no idea what to do with himself, and then he had tucked it around her with the careful hands of a man who was pretending he was not doing something kind. Sandra was in the garden. Isel came and sat on the low stone step near the garden door, not sitting beside her, just nearby, which was still his way.
The older one, he said.
She waited. His daughter was taken, he said. Yilin had her for 6 weeks. He passed the seed information to get her back. A long silence. Is she safe now? Sandra asked.
Yes.
She has been back for 3 weeks. He did not know that Yilin had let her go. She had kept him paying with information, even after the girl was home. He paused. He was trying to protect her from a danger that was already gone. That is terrible, Sandra said. Yes. What will you do? Nothing, he said. He owes me nothing. What was taken from him? He stopped. No amount of information he gave her equals what she put him through. She looked at him. That surprises you, he said, reading her expression. A little, she admitted. I told you. I try not to be dangerous to people who do not deserve it. She was quiet. The garden smelled like warm stone and lavender from somewhere down the hill. And Yilin, she said. The documentation is with 3 separate parties now. She will be done by morning. Financially, legally, and professionally. He looked at his hands. It is done. She felt something loosen that she had not realized she had been holding. Then we are safe, she said. You were always going to be safe, he said. I was not going to allow otherwise. You could not have guaranteed that. I know, he said. But I was going to try until I could not anymore. That is the best version of a guarantee I know how to give. She looked at him for a moment. This man who had lived 11 years inside a kind of sadness, who had walked into the wrong wedding with the wrong jacket, who had crouched down at an airport to listen to a 7-year-old because something in him had known that the truth, sometimes, comes from the smallest, most overlooked source. What happened 11 years ago, she said. She had held off on asking. She had decided it was a door for another time. But it was late, and the village was quiet, and something had shifted in the last hour. Something had been set down, and it felt like the right time for a door. He was quiet for so long she thought he was not going to answer. My younger brother, he said. He was 22. He wanted nothing to do with what I had built. He was in university, architecture, he was going to build things. Good things.
He stopped.
A rival group used him to get to me. He survived. Barely. He looked at the dark garden. I made choices after that. Very fast choices. The kind you do not get to take back. He paused. He is alive, and he does not speak to me, and I do not. Another pause. I do not blame him. Sandra said nothing for a moment. And you have been carrying that for 11 years, she said. Yes. Has it made you safer? She said. The choices you made. Faster, sharper. Has it worked? He thought about it honestly. Yes, he said. And no. I am harder to reach now. But the people around me are still in danger. Today proved that. He paused. A 7-year-old girl is in my safe house because of what I built. She is in your safe house because of what Yilin built, Sandra said. That is a different thing. He looked at her. You defend me a great deal for someone who is.
For someone who what? She said.
For someone who barely knows me, he said. I know some things, she said. I know you crouched down to listen to children. I know you sat with my daughter at a wedding and answered her questions without flinching. I know you called me at 5 in the morning to warn me, instead of just handling it quietly and hoping I would not notice. She paused. I know that when you found out about the man whose daughter was taken, your first instinct was not punishment. He was very still. Those are not small things, she said. The silence between them was different now. Warmer. The kind that feels less like an absence and more like a presence. Sandra, he said. After this, after Osaka, after the normal life, he stopped. Ask me again in 48 hours, she said. You still have 12 left. Something crossed his face, something that was unmistakably the uncomplicated kind of happiness that looks like it has forgotten to check with the rest of the person before showing up. 12 hours, he said. 12 hours, she agreed. But at 6 in the morning, 8 hours before the 48 were up, Sandra found a note. Not from Isol. From Sang-min. It said, he received a call at 3 a.m. It was his brother. He is gone. He did not want to wake you. He says, tell her I will explain. Tell her. And then there were 3 words in Korean that Sang-min had written phonetically. She looked them up. They meant do not stop. She stood in the kitchen of the safe house holding the note, and Diana came in her socks and looked at her face and said, very quietly, he left. He left, Sandra said. Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he'll come back. You don't know that, Sandra said. No, Diana said. But he left a message. People who are done leaving don't leave messages. Sandra put the note in her pocket. She made coffee. She stood at the window and looked at the garden. And she waited, not because she was weak, not because she could not leave, but because Diana was right, and she had known at the moment she read those 3 words. Do not stop. 3 weeks passed. Sandra went back to Osaka. She went back to work, the clinic where she translated between patients and doctors, between languages and fears, bridging the space where people could not reach each other alone. She picked Diana up from school every day. She cooked. She walked along the river on evenings when the light was long. She did not hear from Isol. Diana did not ask about him, which was somehow more significant than if she had. On the 18th day, Sandra got a package. No return address, French postmark. Inside was a small carved wooden bird, the kind of work that takes patience, that takes someone who cares about the small things. And a note. Still resolving. Still here. I have not forgotten the 12 hours. She put the bird on the windowsill. On the 21st day, she got another message. My brother and I spoke for 4 hours. It was the hardest thing I have done in 11 years. He does not forgive me yet. But he did not hang up. That is enough for now. She replied. That is everything. His response, yes. A few more days of silence. Then, can I call you? She typed, yes. And then, before she could reconsider it, she added, you can also just call without asking first. I would not mind. The call happened that evening, late, his late, her late, the overlap of time zones that meant both of them were in the particular quiet of the end of a day. It was strange and also completely natural, the way the best conversations are, starting with the small things and moving through them to the bigger ones without either person having to announce the transition. He told her about his brother, about the architecture firm his brother had eventually built, despite everything, maybe because of everything. About a building in a coastal city that his brother had designed, curved lines, and a roof garden that grew food for a local shelter. She told him about a patient that week, an elderly man from West Africa who had been trying to say something to his doctor for 3 visits and could not find the words in any language they shared, and how she had finally found the right bridge and watched the man's whole body release something it had been holding. "That is what you do," Isel said. "Find bridges." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Is that what I am doing with you?"
"No," he said.
"With me you are." A pause. "You are the destination, not the bridge." She held the phone and looked out the window at the Osaka skyline, the lights making their familiar pattern against the dark.
"That was well said," she said.
"I have been thinking about it for 3 weeks," he said. She laughed. It came out surprised, the kind of laugh you do not plan, the kind that comes from genuine delight rather than politeness. She heard him, on the other end of the line, go very still the way people go still when they hear something they want to remember. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Ask." "I am going to step back from certain parts of what I have built," he said. "Not all at once. But the parts that put people in orange vests at airports. The parts that cost my brother 12 years of silence." He paused. "This is not something I am telling you to convince you of anything.
I want to be clear about that.
I am telling you because it is true, and because I think you should know who I am becoming, not just who I have been."
She was quiet.
"How?" she said finally. "There is a legitimate side," he said. "There has always been. I have been building it slower than I should have, because it was easier to be what I already was." Another pause. "It is not going to be quick."
"No," she said.
"It is not. But I have started." She believed him. She did not know exactly why. She had 6 languages and a very good brain, and she had also met enough people to know the difference between a decision and a performance, but she believed him. "Diana would want to know," she said. A silence, then. "Can I tell her myself?" "You want to call a 7-year-old to explain your ongoing life changes."
She deserves to know. She is involved.
She was the beginning of this. Something in Sandra's chest did a thing she had no precise word for in any of her 6 languages, which was its own kind of interesting. "She gets home from school at 4, Sandra said. "She likes to have a snack first. Call at 4:30. The call at 4:30 lasted 32 minutes. Sandra sat in the kitchen and pretended to read something while Diana sat cross-legged on the sofa with the phone on speaker, completely focused, nodding at things, asking follow-up questions with the precision of a 7-year-old who has decided something matters. At the end, Diana said, "Okay, I think you should come visit." Sandra looked up. "Diana," she started. "Mom wants you to come visit," Diana said. She just doesn't know how to say it without making it sound complicated. A brief silence from the phone. Then Isel said, in a very careful voice, "Does she?" Sandra put her head in her hands. "Yes," Diana said, deeply satisfied. She put the bird on the windowsill. Another silence. "Diana," Sandra said, "could you possibly—" "The bird," Isel said. "She put it right in the middle," Diana said. "Not to the side. The middle." "I see," he said. Sandra looked at the windowsill. The bird was, in fact, exactly in the middle. She had not consciously chosen the middle. Or she had, and she had not admitted it. 4:30, Isel said. "Good time for visit. After snack, before dinner," Diana confirmed. "That can be arranged." Diana looked at her mum with the expression of someone who has completed a task and is expecting acknowledgement. Sandra pointed at the phone. "Say goodbye." "Goodbye," Diana said to the phone. "Also, I'm glad you and your brother talked." A pause. "Me too," Isel said quietly. He came 3 weeks later. He came with Sangmin, who was apparently never not there, and he came in a jacket that was, this time, entirely appropriate to the occasion, which Sandra noticed and which he noticed her noticing, and they both said nothing about it, which was its own small exchange. Diana showed him the river walk. She showed him where to get the good taiyaki, the ones shaped like fish with the bean paste in the middle, and she showed him the school where she went, and the corner where she waited for her mum every afternoon, and the spot along the river where the light came in a certain way in the evenings that she had decided was her favorite place in the city. Isel walked through all of it with the focused attention of someone who was trying to understand something that mattered, not just observe it. Sandra walked beside him and thought about 11 years and 7 years and the way time can carry a person so far from themselves that they forget where they were trying to go. She has built a whole world, Isel said, quietly, watching Diana run ahead to find Sangmin, who had somehow become her second favorite walking companion. Yes, Sandra said. In a city she chose. We chose it together. She was 3. Her criteria were somewhere with good fish. A pause. She was very specific about the fish. He did not quite laugh, but something in him did the equivalent of it, which she was starting to recognize. You built all of this, he said. On your own. Yes, she said. It was not pride, or not only pride. It was just the truth. Then you already know how to do the hard part, he said. The building part. When things do not look finished yet. She looked at him. Are you referring to a building or to yourself? She said.
Both, he said.
She looked at the river. The evening light was doing what evening light does along that stretch, something between gold and bronze, catching the water, making the ordinary version of the city look like the extraordinary version. I need you to understand something, she said. Tell me. I am not someone who waits for a person to become something. I am not. She searched for the right shape of it. I am not a project, and I do not take on projects. If you are still in the middle of becoming something, I can respect that.
I can even walk alongside it.
But I will not carry it. That is your weight to carry.
I know that, he said.
Do you? You told me at the safe house, he said. You said it is your weight to carry. I have not forgotten. She had not realized he had taken that in so precisely. Good, she said. I am not asking you to carry anything, he said. I am asking, he stopped. Started again. I am asking if there is a version of this where we figure out what comes next. Together. Without one of us waiting for the other to be finished. She was quiet for a moment. Diana would say yes, she said. Diana has already said yes, he said. She said it approximately 12 minutes ago, while showing me the taiyaki shop. Sandra looked at her daughter, who was now attempting to teach Sangmin something, impossible to know what, with the energy of a person who has unlimited confidence in their ability to teach. She really does not leave room for uncertainty, does she?
Sandra said.
No, he said. Sandra watched the light on the water. She thought about a small girl in an airport who had heard 2 words in a language she had learned from cooking shows, Salvolo, Aspetta il Segnale, and had looked at a stranger and decided that the right thing to do was say the true thing, even to a man who was more than he appeared, even in a crowd of 400 people who were all walking the other way. She thought about the fact that the whole chain of it, every single thing, had started because Diana listened. Not because she was looking for something. Not because she had been trained or told or prepared. Just because she listened. Because she paid attention. Because nobody had told her yet that small people are supposed to stay quiet around important situations. Yes, Sandra said. He looked at her. Yes, she said again. There is a version of this. He was quiet for a moment in the particular way of a person receiving something they had not let themselves expect. The 12 hours ran out weeks ago, he said. They did, she agreed. You waited. I am a translator, she said. I know how to wait for the right word to arrive. He looked at her, long enough, steady enough, that she felt entirely seen by it and entirely unafraid of being seen. Diana came running back from wherever Sangmin had followed her to, slightly out of breath, taiyaki in one hand. Are you both done being slow? She said. Almost, Sandra said. I've been waiting, Diana said. You are 7, Sandra said. You have time. You don't though, Diana told her cheerfully and ran back to Sangmin, who was standing at a respectful distance and looking at the river with the dedication of a man pretending not to have heard any of that. Sandra and Isel stood in the evening light, on the good corner, at the beginning of something neither of them had planned and both of them had been moving toward for much longer than 3 weeks. Neither of them said anything. They did not have to. The river went on being the river. The light went on being the light. Diana went on being Diana, which was, as it had always been, more than enough. A 7-year-old heard 2 Italian words in an airport and decided to say the true thing to a stranger. That was the beginning. Everything else, the wedding, the warning, the safe house, the bird on the windowsill, the evening on the river, was what happened because one small person decided to pay attention. That is the story. And it is not over. The next chapter is already moving, and you are going to want to be here for it. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single word of what comes next, because what Diana overheard in that airport was only the first secret, and the second one changes everything.